Welcome to this session on Gender and Society, Chapter 3.9 in the OCR A-Level Religious Studies specification. Firstly, take a pause of the video and see whether you can define these key terms. So, gender biology is the physical characteristics that enable someone to be identified as either male or female. Gender identification is the way people perceive themselves in terms of masculine, feminine, both or neither. Gender expression is the ways in which people behave as a result of their gender identification. Socialization is the process by which people learn cultural norms. A patriarchal society is a society that is dominated by men and men's interests, so a world that's made for men. And feminism is the name given to the wide range of views of arguing for and working for equality for women. So a quick recap. Christianity has traditionally taken the view that God created two distinct genders, each with their own skills and complementary natures, both equally valuable to God and made in God's image. In contemporary secular society, questions whether traditional views of gender and family life are appropriate or whether they are repressive. So first we're going to look at biological sex and gender. So biological sex is determined by physical attributes, so most people are born clearly male or female, but some people have physical characteristics of both male and female and have an ambiguous biological sex. So some people are born intersex. And gender is a more sophisticated concept combining gender biology, so the physical characteristics, gender identification, so the gender in which a person feels most comfortable, which is not necessarily distinctly male or female, and gender expression, which is the ways in which a person chooses to behave, such as the way they clothe and speak, and which might be traditionally associated with a gender or not. So it depends on what the individual might feel. So people are born with a biological sex, but gender is heavily influenced by society. So socialization is the lifelong process by which we learn the norms of our society, and socialization tells us how people of different genders are expected to behave in society with both spoken and unspoken rules. And traditionally in the UK, we are socialized to think in a gender binary term. So in other words, that there are two distinct genders, so male and female, and people should belong to either one or the other depending on their biological sex. But these ideas are becoming to be challenged by society. So changing the views of gender and gender roles. So there are many different attributes to gender and gender roles. One is that there is the view that men and women are not equal and that men are superior to women. And this view dates back to as far as Plato and Aristotle. So Plato believed that the souls were reborn as women if they were failed as men. So again, you can really see it's quite a critical and discriminatory and degrading attitude. So Aristotle also thought that women are defective males, so who were naturally inferior and more inclined to weak behaviour. And Aquinas wrote that women are inferior to men in physical strength and intelligence, although he did think that there was a special place in heaven for the Virgin Mary and for women who stayed at the foot of Jesus on the cross. So people like Mary Magdalene as well. So you can kind of see that's how it's quite a traditional, possibly seen as a regressive view. And there is the view that men and women are equally valuable to God, but they have different complementary characteristics that are suited to different roles in domestic and public life. So some churches take this view and use it to argue that women should not be priests on the grounds that Jesus chose only men to be his closest disciples, and that a woman cannot represent Christ when celebrating the Eucharist. There are some scholars who say that Jesus actually had 12 male disciples but also 12 female disciples, because the Bible talks about the disciples walking 2 by 2, so it reflects to the 2 by 2 walking in Noah's Ark, the two animals walking in, so it reflects that there is both female and male disciples, possibly. But again, it's obviously can't be proved, but it's just a speculation that some scholars in theology do hold to be more feminist in that sense. Some people, such as feminist theologian Mary Daly and many separatist feminists, take the view that women are superior to men. An increasingly popular view is the idea of masculine qualities and feminine qualities is misguided. So according to this perspective, society encourages people to conform to binary gender roles, but this is learnt behaviour rather than natural tendency. So in this view, there is no sense in saying that men are better than women or that women are better than men, because everyone is different, and there is no such thing as male nature or female nature. So changes in society as they become more multicultural and diverse lead to a wider range of beliefs and attitudes about the roles of men and women in society. So during the 20th century, changes were made in laws that enabled women to have more freedom, and some significant changes included women being allowed to vote on an equal footing with men in 1928. So women got the vote in 1918 after World War I, as they proved, would say, that they could take on the roles of men. As a lot of the men had to go off to war, women took on the roles of men of farming, producing certain weapons and using machines that they couldn't have used before, because it was seen as a male job. But in 1928 was when most women got the vote. As in 1918 it was women above a certain age that could. The other one is that reliable birth control became available from the 60s, at first only for married women who had completed their families. Abortion was legalised in the UK, that's meant to say, except Northern Ireland in 1967, and in Northern Ireland it was legalised in 2021, so not that long ago. And the Equal Pay Act of 1970 legally entitled women to be paid the same as men for doing the same job, although there are still difficulties with that today, although it's a lot better than back then. And from 1974, single women could obtain the contraceptive pill, enabling women to have more control over their sexual activity, both within and outside of the context of marriage. So again, these significant changes illustrated the progressive scale of a woman within society. So what is the patriarchy? So a patriarchal society is one in which men have more power than women, dominating social statuses, domestic life and government. So patriarchal societies tend to be organised in ways that benefit men a lot more than women. And in patriarchal societies, men's history tends to be recorded more than women's. Men's art is more celebrated than women's, and men are encouraged into higher levels of education than women. Men are paid more. For example, medical research is done in order to enhance male bodies, not female bodies. So we live in a patriarchal society. And in patriarchal societies, men are usually seen as stronger than women, and men make the measure of what counts as stronger. Whilst feminism is not a single ideology, but the name given to a wide range of views sharing the aim of improving rights and opportunities for women. So not all feminists agree. Generally, the term feminism is traditionally for men and women to be equal. But there are different strands of feminism. So we have liberal feminism, and this seeks equality by campaigning for changes in law. Separatist feminism seeks freedom for women in isolation from men, closely related to lesbian feminism. Ecofeminism emphasises a connection between women and ecological issues. Black feminism seeks to give a voice, rights and opportunities to non-white women. And Marxist feminism sees women's struggles for freedom through the lens of Karl Marx and communism, so socialist feminism. And radical feminism advocates total societal change away from patriarchal and capitalist views. So one of the best known early feminist texts was A Vindication of the Rights of Women by Mary Wollstonecraft in 1792. And she produces after the French Vindication of the Rights of Man, that was seen to illustrate what human rights and what rights men have. So she did the same for women. She advocated educating girls to the same standard as boys, and she was the first feminist philosopher, let's say. So there are many different waves of feminism. So the first wave feminism was particularly concerned with gaining the rights for women to vote, beginning in the late 19th century. And second wave feminism took on wider issues, especially in connection with women's sexual and reproductive health and equality in the workplace, so in the 60s, 70s. Whilst third wave feminism refers to movements beginning in the 1990s, calling into question the whole idea of gender roles, as well as aiming to be more inclusive of the voices of women of colour and diverse sexual and ethnicities. But you can kind of see how we're going backwards a bit within society now, because obviously in America, Poland, those kind of places, the right to abortion is being retracted from women. So we can kind of see that second wave feminism is kind of coming back again, because the right to sexual reproductive health is becoming weaker. And sometimes feminism is identified as having three waves. There are probably more waves now, just because of the struggle of women still with things like femicide as well. In 2021, for example, with the death of Sarah Everard, really sparked a new way of women's safety on streets, for example. So traditional Christian views about men and women. There is a wide range of views within Christianity about the roles of men and women in the family and in society. And traditional Christian teaching based on the Bible presents men and women as being created by God to have different complementary roles. So the book of Genesis teaches that men and women are both made in the image of God. Man is created first, and the woman second, to be a helper and companion for the man. And the woman was the first to succumb to temptation from the serpent, to the devil, in the Garden of Eden. So Eve is seen to have tempted Adam. So from this perspective, sometimes women are seen as seductresses and temptresses that succumb men to wrongdoing and sin. In the letters to new Christian churches in the New Testament, so the first century, teaches that an ordinary household has the man as the head of the house. The husband should love their wives in the way Christ loves the church. Wives should accept the authority of her husband, but what's always left out is that husbands should also accept authority of their wives. And women should not teach or speak in church, which is what St. Paul talks about. So Christian teaching developed in a particular social context. So some argue that biblical teaching has authority as the word of God and should be accepted as authoritative for all times and cultures, whilst others argue that social rules, such as rules about gender roles, need to be recognised given the society has changed. And traditional gender roles in the Christian church have been challenged by some as biblical patriarchy, so a term to illustrate that the Bible is more leaning towards men and a world for men. So written by men, led by men's interests to reinforce male dominance. And others responded by saying that the Bible comes from God, not from one gender, and that God has decided to create two distinct genders with distinct purposes. So there are some Christian responses to contemporary secular views about gender roles. So Christian views about contemporary roles of women in the home, in society and the church vary wildly. So Mulerius Dignitatem on the dignity of women was written in 1988 as an open letter by John Paul II on the subject of the dignity and rights of women to clarify the Catholic position on issues raised about feminism. And what it talks about is that women have particular skills and qualities as exemplified by many European saints. So this could be even Mary, one as the role of a mother. No one would be here or at all unless women fulfilled their unique role in bringing the next generation into the world. So again, the role of motherhood being really important. Women are naturally more capable than men of attending to the needs of others, as well as being better at coping with pain. So women are seen to be more compassionate, more caring. Women are naturally disposed to motherhood, both physically and psychologically, and this disposition is a gift from God. Again, Mary being an example here, being the mother of God. So both virginity and motherhood are admirable, and Jesus' incarnation was made possible by a woman. The fact that Mary gave birth to him. And a woman's role as a Christian is to be respected. and men and women have different complementary characteristics given by God. So again, you can see that all of this is mostly centered on the fact that women are meant to be mothers a lot of the time. Although some European saints have illustrated women to be more than mothers. So for example, Joan of Arc is a really key example here. So this letter was criticised by some, especially on the grounds that women cannot achieve dignity and respect unless they have access to artificial contraception, whilst the Church does not allow it. And Pope John Paul II was very much against women having abortion. And he was also against the concept of contraception, but not only for the fact that it disrespects or doesn't allow for procreation, which is what natural moral law advocates for and what the Catholic Church follows, but the fact because it shows that men can use women's bodies, and therefore he saw it as wrong without taking responsibility of the consequences of having a baby. Contemporary Christian teachings from many sources remind people that women should be treated with respect. And there are Christian views about different types of family. So the concept of an ideal family or two parents and their children is traditional, but there are and always have been families and households of different kinds. So a family as a concept is difficult to define. Sociologists and anthropologists see it as a social unit, usually made of people who are related to each other, where tasks are shared and members protect each other. And Christianity traditionally sees the ideal family as one with two married heterosexual parents and their children. And Christianity teaches that marriage is the best context for raising children, and some Christians understand this to be heterosexual marriage, but some are supportive of the idea of children being raised by same-sex couples. And this is a view that's growing more and more acceptable, especially in Western cultures. So divorce is an issue for Christians, and the Catholic Church does not recognise divorce. And so if people separate, then they want to marry a new partner. The Catholic Church regards this as adultery because God has already joined them to the first partner for life as a sacrament which cannot be undone. And many other Christian denominations recognise divorce and allow divorced people to marry in the church, and emphasising the importance of forgiveness in Christian morality. And this is mostly the Church of England, in the UK anyway. But within Catholicism, you can ask for an annulment, and that is granted by the Pope. And it's as if the marriage never happened, so therefore the actual union never happened. So you can then remarry after, and it's not seen as a sin or adultery. And same-sex marriage is an issue for Christians, so some welcome it as a celebration of God-given human love and its variety, and some see it as an opportunity to support couples in committed relationships, regardless of the sexuality. But others see marriage as a sacred institution given by God and intended to be only by a man and woman. So homosexuality is an issue for Christians, and some see it as unnatural and believe that homosexual people should live celibate lives. And others accept homosexuality, but do not think marriage is the right word for same-sex partnerships, whilst other Christians think that same-sex couples should be treated in the same way as heterosexual couples. And that was granted in 2014, whilst David Cameron was Prime Minister, was when the first same-sex marriage took place, although before it was just civil unions for civil partnerships. So different views of motherhood, and again we have Mary as a key figure here. So in Christianity, motherhood is seen as a role with special dignity and value. In the Catholic Church, the supreme example is the Virgin Mary, the mother of Jesus. So Christianity teaches that children are a gift from God. In Catholic teaching, following the principle of natural law, artificial conception should not be used, and sex between a husband and wife should always allow for the possibility of the creation of new life. Hence why contraception is not favoured. Although natural forms of contraception are, so for example the rhythm method or timing your cycle. And many non-Christians, both secular and from non-Christian religions, agree that motherhood can be one of life's most profound experiences. And some thinkers have taken a different view. So Simone de Beauvoir wrote a really prominent feminist philosopher, French philosopher, wrote in the 1940s that motherhood forces women to crush their own personalities so they can care for others. So again, there's a lot of sacrificing in the role of Mary, which is why she is seen as a very much important figure in Christianity, especially Catholicism. And the sociologist Anne Oakley wrote about the negative side of motherhood, saying that it often leaves women powerless and restricted. The other thing is that not all women are or have the maternal instinct. A lot of women are seen as, if they don't have the maternal instinct, they're not fulfilling the purpose that they're meant to be fulfilling of having children, which can cause a lot of pressure for women. So that's all of the AO1 content for this topic. So pause this video and see whether you can answer all these questions. If you can, then you know all the AO1 knowledge for this topic. Now it's time for some exam practice, because practice makes perfect. So the first question is, secular views of gender equality have undermined Christian gender roles. Discuss. So within this, you would obviously start with your introduction, and you would demonstrate knowledge and understanding through the sense of some of these ideas. So you can describe and explain what gender equality might mean. Describe and explain how ideas of gender roles have changed. So for example, with the right to vote or sexual revolutions, you can describe and explain traditional Christian gender roles and the justification of these roles in the Bible and from the teachings of the church. So for example, the Mulieris Dignitatem of John Paul II. You can also describe and explain how gender roles are understood in secular modern society. And in order to agree with this statement, so your arguments supporting this, you can talk about how secular ideas promote gender equality, but the Bible teaches that men have authority over women. Secular ideas undermine the role of women as mothers, encouraging women to use artificial conception, have abortions and divorce their husbands when these practices contravene the teachings of the Catholic Church. Although there is also a quote that supports divorce, so it's, men do not divorce your wives, but if you do want to divorce them, grant her a certificate of divorce. So this is in the Old Testament, and it's mostly seen as a Jewish practice, and some Orthodox Jews still follow this, the fact that only men can divorce their wives, but wives can't divorce their husbands. So that is one quote that you can use to support divorce in Christianity in the Old Testament. There's also secular ideas suggesting that there are not simply two separate genders created by God, but that the gender is a social construct which can put Christians in uncomfortable positions over issues such as transgender rights. You can also talk about secular ideas encouraging women to seek positions of authority in the church, even though this contravenes some biblical teachings. And you can give examples of which biblical teachings it contradicts. One could be something like Eve was made as a helper for Adam, so the fact that she was created to be his help and not his equal. In order to disagree with this, you can talk about Christians don't have to do what secular society does and can continue to have traditional gender roles in the church and in the home if they wanted to. Secular gender roles and disagreements with traditional Christians might give Christians opportunities to talk about Christian beliefs to friends and neighbours and to the media. And Christians need to take on board ideas about greater gender equality, as the teaching of the Bible also says that everyone is made in the image of God and that there are no male or female differences, they're equal. So secular gender roles encourage Christians to think about the position of women in the church and to make changes for the better. So secular gender roles enhance rather than undermine Christianity, because they encourage Christians to rethink old-fashioned cultural viewpoints. And then obviously you can conclude with what is the strongest argument. For this question, how convincing is the claim that the idea of family is entirely culturally determined? Obviously start with an introduction introducing your key terms, and then you can describe and explain different understandings of what a family might be. You can also give a description and explanation of sociological and anthropological views, that the family is a human institution developed by society for well-being, protection and division of labour of its members. You can describe and explain of the view that the family is something designed by God as part of his purpose for human flourishing. Again, give quotes and examples, something like Adam and Eve being the first humans that were created, possibly. You can talk about the description and explanation of biblical teaching about the family as well. Describe and explain other sources of wisdom or authority about Christian family. So the Magisterium Dignitatum is one, for example. And in order to support this, you can talk about the family life is different in different cultures. So for example, in more industrial societies, people tend to live in smaller nuclear families, whereas in more agricultural societies, people tend to live in wider extended family groups. You can talk about different people having different views of what a family might consist of. So for example, there are different views about same-sex marriage, which could suggest that the family is whatever people say it is. So again, give examples of this that we've went through. Living in families has patriarchal advantages as well, which people provide a better explanation for the existence of family units than the view that God obtained the family. And in order to contradict this, you can say that the Bible contains teachings about the importance of families and about how family life should be organised. So this includes a relation between husband and wife, parents and children, masters and servants, showing that family life is part of God's plan for procreation, mutual protection and education of the young. Again, give examples of all of these, whether it's from natural moral law and the primary precepts, or some quotes to support this as well. Natural law ethics supports the view of family life with heterosexual marriage, couples raising children as part of God's purpose for humanity and one of the primary precepts. People all over the world live in family units, suggesting that there is something universally right about family life, not only through a religious perspective. And it could be argued that relationships within a family are affected by and affect the norms of society, but the existence of the family itself as a unit is ordained by God. And then you can obviously conclude showing what is the most convincing argument. But throughout your whole essay, do give arguments of strengths and weaknesses of all the arguments, showing your own critical analysis of this. So thanks for joining me, and join me next time for more philosophy, theology, and ethics.